Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into week 14 of my top starts and sits as we head into the final week of the push for the fantasy football playoffs. I hope my advice throughout the season has actually already gotten you guys to lock up your playoff spots. But if you're like me, or you do have some leagues that you do need a win this weekend to make sure you do lock up your spot to be playing going forward for the remainder of the 2022 fantasy football season, hope I'm here to help you guys out. So let's just go ahead and dive into this. As always, I'm going to start with the quarterback position. My top start of the week, it's going to be Kirk Cousins against those Detroit Lions. The Lions defense hasn't been that great against the pass this year. They are allowing, in terms of fantasy, 23.2 points per game. That is the most allowed across the NFL. And with that being said, I said this in the waiver wire video, which if you guys haven't watched quite yet, go back and watch that because some of those names I mentioned throughout that video might be still available, especially those streamable defenses. But getting back on track, like I mentioned in that video, I think the Lions and the Vikings are about to be in this shootout, a barn burner. I could see both teams getting to 28 plus points, where the winner of that matchup is going to have to score at least 30 points. So, with that being said, I think Kirk Cousins is going to have one of his ceiling games. I believe this is a 1 p.m. Eastern game, which does mean that's the slot that Kirk typically does perform at his best. So, if you're looking for a streaming quarterback, I've seen him out there on some of the waiver wires. So if he's available and you're looking to stream a quarterback because you're missing Lamar, I don't think Kirk's a bad option for you. My other start, I decided to still stick with him despite today's report. I am going with Trevor Lawrence against the Titans. So he did come out of that matchup against the Lions banged up. It came out today. He does have a sprained toe. He did not practice today, but he says as long as he's able to play, he plans on playing. I'm assuming that he came back in that game. He's going to be out there on Sunday against the Titans. And that Titans defense, what they're really great at, they're really great against the run, but very bad against the pass. We saw what Jalen Hurts did this past Sunday against that defense. And when you look at as far as terms of fantasy, the Titans are giving up 20.4 points per game to quarterbacks this year. That is tied for the third most allowed across the NFL. So if you have Trevor Lawrence on your lineup, or maybe he is out there on the market in your league, I would consider playing him if you're looking for an option at the quarterback spot this week. My sits. One guy I would definitely look to avoid putting into my lineup as a streaming option is going to be Daniel Jones against the Eagles. I think I say this every week as a sit for the quarterback position, so I am kind of reiterating myself. But with that being said, the Eagles are only allowing 10.7 points per game. That's the fewest across the NFL. So if you were considering playing Daniel Jones because you just lost Lamar Jackson, I would not do that if I were you. My next sit, this is a guy I would not play at all in any of my daily fantasy lineups. But with that being said, in redraft and dynasty with 6 teams on a bye week, you're probably going to end up having to play Dak Prescott unless maybe you can go out there and grab a Kirk Cousins and Trevor Lawrence if you have the extra room on your bench to store 2 quarterbacks on your roster. That's just because he's playing the Texans. I mean, you guys have heard me say this every week. The Texans right now, they're actually now bumped down to where they're only allowing 12 points a game to quarterbacks this year. That's the second fewest across the NFL. But don't get that confused. It's not because of their defense, as because they're good. I'm about to talk about their running backs. I do this every week with you guys, so you guys have been sticking with me throughout the last 13 weeks. You guys already know the story of the Texans defense. But just in case we do have any first-time listeners, the thing with the Texans defense is A, spoiler alert, you can run the ball against them. B, they're a bad team, right? So teams are typically going up big on them pretty early. So what that means is like the Cowboys, can't you not see the? I mean, look what I mean, it did all happen in the fourth quarter, but the Colts are, in my opinion, even though they're pretty bad this year, they're still a way better team as far as terms of talent than the Texans. So with that being said, can't you see the Cowboys, like all of a sudden you look at the scoreboard on Sunday and you're like the Cowboys are already up 21 nothing in the second quarter of this game? know what they're going to do? They're just going to hand the ball off to Pollard and Zeke all in the second half, which means Dak Prescott is not going to get the volume of opportunity to put up a lot of fantasy points for you this week. So again, redraft dynasty, you're probably gonna have to play him, especially with all these teams on a bye. But if you got some extra room to go pick up a Kirk Cousins or Trevor Lawrence or any of the quarterbacks I mentioned in my waiver wire video, I would definitely consider that for this week. So again, my top starts: Kirk Cousins against the Lions, Trevor Lawrence against the Titans, and then Daniel Jones against the Eagles, and Dak Prescott against the Texans. Moving into the running back position, as I just rehashed, I don't have to go all over like how bad the Texans can't stop the run, but Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott are my easiest starts of the week against the Texans. The Texans are allowing 24.8 points per game to running backs this year. That is the most allowed across the NFL. I'm not going to keep on going into how bad this Texans defense is against the run. I already pretty much explained that, talking to you guys about sitting Dak. So with that being said, Pollard, Zeke, easy starts this week. So moving into my next set of names, guys that just had a really bad game, really bad fantasy game against that really good 49ers defense. Hint, hint, as you guys can see the next names I'm about to talk about. With that being said, I think both these guys are set to have a bounce back performance on the Sunday night matchup against the Chargers. Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. The Los Angeles Chargers are allowing 23.1 points per game to running backs this year. That is the second most allowed across the NFL. We just saw Josh Jacobs run all over them. So if you have Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, you're kind of feeling disappointed in what they did for you last week. I think they're going to have a bounce back performance and get back on track as far as what they were doing prior to week 13 of this year. Moving into my top six, like I just talked about. That 49ers defense is really good this year across the board. So if you have Rachaad White and Leonard Fournette, I would consider leaving them on your bench this week. Again, it's 6 teams on a bye, so a lot of these names might have to just be temper your expectation plays in redraft and dynasty, but I would definitely not put Rachaad White or Leonard Fournette in any of my daily fantasy football lineups. That 49ers defense, they're only giving up 10.7 points per game to running backs this year. That's easily the fewest amount across the NFL. So if you have Rachaad White, Leonard Fournette, try to get him out of your lineup if you can this week. Another sit, I would go ahead and consider sitting James Conner against the Patriots. As I always say, Bill Belichick is really good at figuring out how he can stop his opposing team's rushing attack. With that being said, when you look at the fantasy numbers, they're only giving up 12.8 points per game to running backs this year. That is the second fewest amount in the NFL. Again, so like with the running back and wide receiver positions, these guys I'm talking about, with 6 teams being on the bye, they might have to be temper your expectation plays. But if you're able to put Conner on your bench and play somebody else that has a better matchup, I definitely would consider doing that this week. So again, my top starts at running back: Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott against the Texans, and Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. against the Chargers. And then my sits: Rachaad White and Leonard Fournette against the Niners, and James Conner against the Patriots. Moving into my top wide receiver starts and sits, feeding off what I talked about Trevor Lawrence against the Titans and how you can throw the ball against them. Obviously, that means you're going to be able to play their wide receivers. So with that being said, any of these 3 wide receivers I would consider playing this week: Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, or Marvin Jones Jr. against the Titans. The Titans are giving up 27.8 points per game to wide receivers this year. That just actually overtaken the top spot as far as what the points were allowed. The previous team that was as giving up the most was the Steelers, but after Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith just went off against this defense, I can definitely see that Jacksonville Jaguars offense going through the air and taking advantage of the matchup. So if you got Kirk or Zay Jones or Marvin Jones Jr., they're definitely names I would consider putting into my lineup. My other top starts, this first name, obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're not going to really ever think about sitting him, especially with the volume of targets he sees when he's in the lineup. But DJ Chark, who just had a good game, I would definitely also consider playing him and Amon-Ra St. Brown against the Vikings this week. The Vikings, they're pretty bad actually against the air because they have had a banged up cornerback group over the last month. And I think they have about month and a half maybe. With that being said, when you look at the fantasy numbers, the Vikings are giving up 24.9 points per game to wide receivers this season. That is the third most across the NFL. So St. Brown's an easy start this week in my opinion, and I think DJ Chark is a sneaky start for you guys if you were like me and I picked him off the waivers in a couple leagues of mine. Moving into my top sits. Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, the three-part names, if you will, against those Broncos. The Broncos, guys, you guys have heard me say this every week. As bad as their offense is, they have a really good defense, and they're only giving up 15.2 points per game to wide receivers this year. That is the fewest amount in the NFL. And with that being said, even though the Broncos defense is really good, with how much struggles the Denver Broncos offense is having, can you not see Kansas City going up pretty early? Like I mentioned about that Cowboys-Texans matchup, right? Can you not see the Chiefs all of a sudden being up 21-7, mid-third quarter, and then they score another touchdown to be up 28-7? And guess what they're going to do? They're just going to hand it off to Pacheco, McKinnon, and I don't know who's there. Ronald Jones maybe even might get some carries because they're going to be up so big against the Broncos on Sunday. With that being said, I would have looked to avoid those names. Honestly, those should be names you could avoid. I don't really think they should have to be temper your expectation plays. But again, 6 teams are on a bye week this week, so maybe you do have to consider playing them depending on how your roster has been formatted throughout the season. Moving into my other sits. Now, Stephon Diggs, hands down, that's a temper your expectation play. Do not sit Stephon Diggs at all in your daily lineups. In your redraft lineups or your dynasty lineups. Now, as far as daily lineups, I would definitely consider not playing Stephon Diggs, but the other names, Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie, I definitely think those are names I would look to avoid this week in my lineups. They are going against the New York Jets. The Jets have a great defense this year. Now they got the rookie in Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed's there, Jordan Whitehead. They have a nice Ashton Davis is going to be back in the lineup this week, I believe, based on the practice report from today. So I do think if I had these Bills wide receivers, I will look to avoid them if I can. With that being said, the Jets are only giving up 17.6 points per game to wide receivers this year. That is the third fewest allowed across the NFL. So again, Diggs is a temper your expectation plays, but if you're able to put Davis and McKenzie on your bench this week, I would definitely consider doing that. With that being said, my top starts: Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Marvin Jones Jr. against the Titans, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown and DJ Chark against the Vikings, and then my sits: Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdes-Scantling against the Broncos, and then Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, and Isaiah McKenzie against the Jets. Moving into the ever so lovely tight end position, my top start of the week. It's slim pickings at this point when it's the Cardinals. You guys have been with me the whole season. Understand? I've been saying the Cardinals are the worst defense against fantasy quarterbacks ever since I've been doing this over the last 5 or so years. I swear I haven't been doing this long. I should rehash that. But with that being said, let's get back on track. Hunter Henry against the Cardinals. The Cardinals are giving up 12.2 points per game to tight ends. They have overtaken the Seahawks now. That is the most allowed in the NFL. So with that being said, if you're looking for a streaming tight end, there's a good chance that Hunter Henry is going to be out there on the market for you, and I would play him this week in my lineup. My other start, going with TJ Hawkinson against his former team, the Lions. You already know he's going to want to ball out against his former team. You already know that, he's going to go to his head coach and be like, I want a touchdown against my former team. So with that being said, sometimes that's all you need out of your tight end is just a touchdown. So I believe that he's going to finish with at least one touchdown on Sunday. But then when you look at the fantasy matchup, the Lions are giving up 9.4 points per game to tight ends this year. That is the third most allowed in the NFL. And it goes back to what I said about Cousins earlier. I feel like this is going to be a high scoring game between both these teams. So I would definitely consider putting Hawkinson in my lineups this week. My sits, if you've been looking for some streaming options, these are two names I would look to avoid. Cade Otton against the 49ers. The Niners, like I talked about earlier, easily have probably the best defense in the NFL. As far as fantasy against the tight end position, they're only giving up 4.3 points per game. That's tied for the second fewest allowed with the next team I'm about to talk about. I'll go ahead and dive into that. Tyler Conklin against the Bills. Conklin has been a nice little streaming option at the tight end position when the matchup is right. Well, the matchup is not right this week for Conklin. The Bills, same as the Niners, only giving up 4.3 points per game, two tight ends this year. So if you see Tyler Conklin out there on the market and you're looking to stream a tight end this week, you don't like what you have, I would look at other names than him. So again, my top starts and sits of the week. My starts, Hunter Henry against the Cardinals and TJ Hawkinson against the Lions. My sits, Cade Otton against the Niners and Tyler Conklin against the Bills. So yeah, that is this week's edition of my top starts and sits for the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end position. As always, guys, if there are any names I did not talk about in this video that you want to hear my opinion on, get in the comment section of this video. I'll return any comments with my analysis on any questions that you may have. If you follow me on any of my social media platforms, which you can find me at Cody Talks NFL, I will get back to you through a DM. And as I always say to the people that have my number, shoot me a text. I'll get back to you with any of my answers. Make sure you do hit the like button. Make sure if you haven't subscribed to my channel, you hit the subscribe button. Other than that, the next time you guys will see me on video will be next Tuesday night when I always do my top waiver wire ads and streamable defenses. I'll see you then. Go lock up your playoff spots. Let's get it done this weekend, and then let's go get this championship. I'll talk to you guys next week. Peace out.